it do, everybody? It's your boy King Crowner, back again with another history lesson of things you may not know and things that wouldn't have to be taught in details for sure. Today's lesson, we will break down the daughters of the Confederates. The daughters of the Confederates were founded by Carolyn Matherly Goodlet and Anna Davenport Rames. The daughter of the Confederates was founded in Nashville, Tennessee, September 10th, 1894. You must understand these were the daughters of the Confederate services who wanted to sustain, improve, and reserve their historical legacy of the historical and Confederate Army of the South. Most people do not know that the whole lost cause narratives came from the daughters of the Confederacy. You must remember, the lost cause was the interpretation of the Civil War, downplaying that the South focus was on keeping slavery and maintaining the system of white supremacy. The daughters of the Confederacy promoted the ideology that the South was doing it to reserve money and economic resources. They were responsible for the ones that you hear about in recent history, about people preserving the legacy of those Confederate monuments, signs, and promoting misinformation that we now know in through historical documents. You must understand that when these fallen soldiers of the Confederate Army passed away, their daughters, children, and grandpeople had a legacy that influenced public education into teaching a different narrative per most Southern households. Most people do not know that the daughter of Confederacy went into a pseudo-historical ideology to talk about white supremacy not being the main issue and to also push Ku Klux Klan members, never focusing on them being a terroristic organization. To think about in today's logic, we have multiple organization gang members that have been hit with RICO charges, terrorist threats, and organization. You always, even in today's climate, never hear about Klan, white supremacist organization being hit with those type of targets. That is because you must understand it is deep entrenched inside the history of the United States to have organizations refer to them as symbolic, not as a terrorist groups, by remixing what they are. These women were focused on this. They were focusing on changing schools to Confederate soldier leaders, to changing monuments all over the South. They went into public textbooks by influencing people by saying their fathers and their ancestral lineage do not do these bad things. Most people do not understand the Daughters of Confederacy are a behind-the-scene organization who have been extremely manipulative, have taught and went about their lessons. These organizations taught from a different side of history. They went and taught that the South did not have a bad linkage and that their ideology was not bad. The Daughters of the Confederacy promoted white supremacy. They also defined the South's point of view and added it was an essential thing that needed to happen when the Civil War. These women promoted a different cause in two education systems that we see in America. The one most shocking thing that as you read and you look up into is that when you hear most people have Southern historical textbooks, you will see a stark difference compared to the uniformity seen in different parts of the United States. If you never wonder why people in the United States have different polarizing view about what is racism, what is classism, when the Civil War happened, what was slavery, you must understand there was organizations like the University Daughter of Confederacy that promoted this ideology. They taught that the people that died on their land were not bad people. They were bolstering that they fought for rights in the South, telling a completely different narrative that was historically inaccurate. They lobbied in state legislators. They told, they campaigned, they taught, they paid. These women raised money to establish a boundary that we still do not umbrella. Most people do not realize why in curriculum across the state, sundown towns are not taught about. Black codes, convict leasing, all of these things that have happened to Black Americans are not taught. We must give these organizations behind the scenes who were saying stuff and manipulating things as to why these issues come about. Confederate is still a term that is viewed not as negative in certain parts of the South, primarily due to the Daughters of Confederacy preaching a different message. If you look at it for context, Most people, if you ask these type of questions in southern neighborhoods and southern society, do not know the historical context in totality. You must understand that organizations like this champion this message. Another great thing that I must say that these Daughters of Confederacy did, in the textbooks, if you look at textbooks in Mississippi school system compared to in New York when they talk about slavery and what it was, the ideology and how they talk about it is completely different. The lost cause narrative of how they needed to fight against the Northern, trying to change them, is what those different and polarizing views we see in American society today. Most people do not even realize that slavery was an undertaught concept, and the deletion of it was going around still in 2015. The Daughters of Confederacy planted, circumvented, targeting middle class and upper middle class children in certain neighborhoods by telling them that these concepts that we hear coming out of certain parts among racism and communities is untold. That's why you hear such a different point of view when you hear about spoken thoughts, spoken reason, and ideology. I recommend that everyone go look into the neo-Confederate agenda and white supremacist ideology that the Daughters of Confederacy had behind the scenes. The Daughters of Confederacy, I must give their organization for being strong and proper. They went into Southern poverty law centers, they changed ideologies, and they supported what Masters and Ku Klux members did. Every American in the United States should understand that there was a covert side of racism that we know about, which is slavery, but there were behind the scenes people that were still preaching ideology gaps that we see in our southern states to this day. That's why when Florida and other states come out and say they don't believe Black history is that profitable, you must understand they have been pumped with the Daughters of Confederacy and their ideology. These organizations that these women did to preserve what their fathers believe in, preaching that the South will rise, that the South won a Civil War, and that the Ku Klux Klan was not that bad, is the reason why disinformation is so common. Daughters of Confederacy must be understood, must be taught, must be talked about, and they must be shared their information. They are still an active organization right now. They are still publishing public articles, preaching public documentation, and they still, to this day, defend the Ku Klux Klan, and the Ku Klux Klan to this day has not been labeled an FBI terrorist organization due to the lobbyists, the money spent, the promotion of this tool, and what they stand for. The Daughters of Confederacy have done more damage than we have ever met, and they're still under-talked and discussed about. Hopefully you learned something today. This your boy King Crowder checking back out again. Want to bring attention to your mind and teach you about historical facts and information you never knew. Please comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Hopefully you learned something today, baby. Peace.